Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code STARDUST to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we have a guest this episode. You know him from the ColbyCast. Welcome back to Podcast Stardust, Colby Meade.
Hey guys, I'm so happy to be here and very excited to talk about the Bad Batch.
Absolutely. Well, we are so glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So, before we get too much farther into this, we're going to be talking about episode 8 of season 3 of the Bad Batch. But before we get started, Jay, I want to remind everybody what our contacts on social media are.
Absolutely, Dennis. We can be found very easily on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
And Colby, where can everyone find you?
Same place as actually not Facebook, but yeah, at the ColbyCast. One word. ColbyCast is one word. Instagram, X, Threads, Hive, Blue Sky. Yeah, I'm there, and all your podcast feeds. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, then. The dish is aligned. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. This will be a full spoiler discussion of episode 8, season 3, The Bad Batch, which is called Bad Territory. But before we get into that, Colby, I've heard you and your voice talk a bit about the season of The Bad Batch over on your show, some, but for our listeners who may not be familiar, what do you think about this season so far?
I adore this show, and this season has gotten better and better with every episode. And it's like, I think Dan has this example that he likes to give. Dan Zare, he likes to talk about, it's all pizza, right? Where there's no bad pizza. There's no bad Star Wars. That's the way I approach it. But this season is just, the word I keep going back to is how sophisticated it is. And I really think it's applicable to the entire series, but it's showing more so even more in this season. The animation is sophisticated, the themes are sophisticated, the characters, which I think is my favorite part about the show, are sophisticated, and it just keeps getting better and better. I'm really enjoying the ride, and I'm trying to not be too sad that it's going to be coming to an end here within a little more than a few weeks, but not trying to think about that, just trying to enjoy the journey. But yeah, I've really loved getting to watch new episodes of The Bad Batch every Wednesday. It's just a thrill.
Oh, it is indeed. And you're right. I mean, this series has really kind of settled into itself. And, at the inception of the whole series, it was just such a gift, but it just seems like it's just such a mature evolution of itself at this point. So I like that word, sophisticated. Good way to put it.
Agreed on all accounts from both of you. Okay, well then let's go ahead and get into this episode. Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary?
Would be my pleasure. The Bad Batch are on Pabu when they get a message from Fee. She reports that she has learned that bounty hunters are retrieving M-count targets for the Empire. Hunter decides they will track down Fennec Shand and see what she knows. Meanwhile, Crosshair and Omega will lay low on Pabu and see what they can do about Crosshair's hand. Hunter and Wrecker end up working a job capturing a high-value target with Fennec in exchange for whatever intel she can get them on the Empire's M-count bounties. As Fennec leaves them behind, she reaches out to an unidentified contact and promises to transfer the information she has on the clones to the contact.
Mm-hmm. So I like this episode. I really did. I think let me rephrase that. I think the mission that Wrecker and Hunter went on with Fennec was interesting and fun, but even better was the interaction between Crosshair and Omega in this. Before we get into some details, what are your all's overall thoughts on this? Colby, we'll let you go first.
I had no idea that I wanted to go to Star Wars Florida, but here we are. We went to Star Wars Florida, even it complete with the hovercraft type of thing going through, and then Star Wars alligators. Before we started recording, Dennis, we were sort of talking a little bit about the last Airbender Avatar, and that world has this great, these great designs of animals where they sort of do hybrid kind of things. These weren't necessarily a hybrid of anything; they were just Star Wars alligators or crocodiles, and I thought that part of it was action packed and thrilling and suspenseful. But I agree with you; the stuff on Pabu is really where the soul is. And if I may just, this is probably a good chance to talk about it. The lighting in this episode, I think, is again sophisticated. You got this rich, beautiful, bathed in light Pabu where we're trying to heal Crosshair, and you got this dark and murky mission that the brothers have to go into, this darkness to try to help Omega get information. And I just love the juxtaposition of the dark and light going back and forth between the two storylines in the episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And Jay, how about you?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Well said. Yeah, for me, I know again, what stands out, and you hit it on the head, Colby, is just the world building that this series has done, and especially in this episode, as you said, with the juxtaposition of the light and the dark, and then the two different types of worlds, and also what's going on within those worlds as well. And then the adventure is just a lot of fun, and there's a lot of really fun things that harken back to classic Star Wars, Cantina and bounty hunters and awesome creatures, and and then we also get some great nods to some other things within the Star Wars fandom and realm of media, such as video games. So there's so much to like about this episode. But what do you think, Dennis?
No, I'm with you. As I was saying just a second ago, it's a good episode. It's a fun mission for Wrecker and Hunter. Wrecker, I feel like, has evolved quite a bit from season 1. It's not Crosshair is not the only one that's had some sort of a story arc. It's just that Crosshairs, I think, is a bit more obvious. I like Hunter putting his foot down when it needs to be put down, because he's been relenting to Omega a lot, and justifiably so, that she wants to be included on missions, that she's proven herself and she should be able to go. But this is not something that she needs to be involved with in order to protect her. And it did afford this opportunity for Crosshair and Omega to have some really touching scenes, and which we'll get into as we go through the episode. As far as the light goes, I have never seen an animated series that was so sophisticated with its use of lighting. That being said, this can be a hard show to watch if you don't have the ideal conditions in your room, because it is frequently very dark. And if you're trying to watch this in the morning and you got windows, that can be a challenge. So I don't know what to do about that. I don't know if I want them to change anything and lose some of that artistic appeal or not. But since we're on the subject of lighting, how do you fall on that, Colby?
Well, I typically watch this. This is such a weird admission, but I didn't know I was going to admit this today. But I typically watch this before sunrise on Wednesday mornings, so I never have a problem with dark scenes. My personal schedule, I'm up very early in the morning, and I have some time in the morning, and I usually will watch anything that drops like overnight. Now, Ahsoka was different because that was like the 6 p.m. on the Pacific, in the Pacific time zone. That was nightly appointment viewing. But the overnight drops, like the Bad Batch has been, I will watch literally before the sun comes up, and I'm almost like in my own movie theater, because it's in my living room, no lights, and it's okay. But when I do rewatch it at other times of the day, you really feel it, right? You're like, oh, especially if maybe I'm at work on lunchtime, I want to maybe watch it on my phone or something, which is not my preferred way of doing it. But I will see that and go like, wow, this is so hard to see. So
Mhm.
yeah, I feel that pain, but personally, I'm able to avoid it just because of my own schedule where I'm able to watch them early in the mornings.
Well, good for you. Yeah, I have a teacher friend that does the same thing, and she'll come to school in the morning. We team teach a STEAM tech and design class, and so she'll say, "Yeah, I watched the Bad Batch this morning," and I said, "Nope, don't tell me anything," and I avoid everything all day long until I can come home and watch it. But it's funny because I was telling Dennis before we started recording that my television is just not holding up well. I mean, it's old.
Mm.
So it looked like the entire time that they were in the swamps that I was literally trying to watch this through pea soup fog, you know? And so I was so frustrated because the same thing happened to me when I was watching the Loki series because there was so much darkness, with the
Yep.
Loki series as well. And so I kept telling my husband, like, I think we need a new television. And then it was okay for a while. And then last night, when this came out and I was watching it, I was so frustrated. So I ended up pulling my phone out and watching it again, and then pulling out more details, that I missed. So I do think that as much as the lighting really is phenomenal in terms of the storytelling aspects and really setting the tone, it can be very difficult if, like you said, Dennis, if you don't really have the right kind of viewing conditions to be able to appreciate it the way that it needs to be.
Mhm. Okay. So let's get into some more of the story here. The episode starts with on Pabu, and Omega is waiting for a call from Echo, and she expresses some guilt that she feels responsible for what happened to Rex and Echo's squad because the Empire is looking for her. And of course, this is when the whole message comes in. What do you think about that? That this guilt that Omega is carrying, is it justified? Is this because she's young? I mean, there's some sophistication to that, but what do you think, Colby?
I think it's right on brand for her because we've seen her maturity, and even though yeah, she's older than her little brothers, she's still not an adult. She's still an adolescent, but she's
Mhm.
always been mature. She's an old soul. And I don't know, we everybody's speculated about her for the longest time about what is her gift, right? Because we all think that she's most likely one of the enhanced clones. And what
Mhm.
is that? Now we know, getting into the season about M count and whatnot, but aside from all of that, she's been very mature this entire time. She's sophisticated, another opportunity to use that word, and I just feel like she's constantly thinking beyond herself, and we see that always when she's considering her brothers, and this is another one of those situations that you can see her doing that. Another person isn't going to think twice. These hardened clones that have lost countless brothers, they're sort of trained not to think that way, but she
Hmm.
hasn't gone through those experiences, right? She's looking at them truly as individuals, and she values each one of them. So when one of them is lost, she feels it, and through her we feel it even more so. And I just think that it's one of those things that makes Omega such a unique and distinct character, and one that I think is honestly has been for over the 3 seasons of the show rising through the ranking of my favorite Star Wars characters. She's up there. I just
Mhm.
really enjoy so much about this character, and the empathy that she shows, like we're being displayed here in the scene you're talking about, is one of those reasons.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so much empathy being shown throughout this particular episode, especially. And as we get into talking about Crosshair, of course, and just the little touches that they put into this episode to really put the exclamation point on that are just superb. But, I agree. And I do think that she does have that gift of being an empath in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
But, as you said, she is young, she's inexperienced when it comes to, where to draw the line with being able to kind of set her feelings aside and look at things from a practical standpoint. But, these are her brothers. Like you said, she's really thinking about them in terms of that and even extending that to Rex because as a clone, I mean, he's a brother of hers too. It's really, when you look at it that way.
Yep.
Well, the last episode, I think she was teasing them about little brother is what she
Right.
called
Yeah.
called him, something like that. And so she does have that older sister thing going on. We're just gonna, I think, go through the Omega Crosshair scenes in one fell swoop here, so we can concentrate on the other story in a second. But the other thing is that, Jay, you kind of coined this back at the beginning of the season when we got that 3-episode drop, that Omega domesticates Crosshair at the same time she was domesticating Batcher. And he kind of reaches out to her and extends that empathy, and then is able to kind of win him over to the plan, to the point where he wants no part of being part of that escape. And then he goes along with it. And then we got to see in the last episode, after the escape pod crashed, do you have your pack? Do you have your energy crossbow? How heavy is that? And then she turns and says, "You're as bad as Hunter." And she's like, "Oh, I'm so much worse." I love that line. We talked about it last week. And but anyways, here it is again. And then over the course of this episode, there's a number of times where she starts mentioning things that happened, and Crosshair is like, "Oh, you went to Kashyyyk?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "You missed a lot." And he's like, "Yeah, I sure did." And so in addition to being an empath, she really is teaching him just how to be, it's beyond the domestication. She's teaching him how to be a person.
Right.
When it comes down to it, because he was loyal to the Empire, but he was an asset, and that's kind of how he saw himself.
Absolutely. And she really does take on the big sister role in so many ways with Crosshair. As I mentioned, with those little touches where when they were trying to meditate and she's trying to get him to reposition his hands, there was that really tender moment where he puts his palm upward and she puts her hand on top of his, and he doesn't resist. And that's a breakthrough for Crosshair, big time. But then there's other times where, as he's practicing with trying to shoot and he's missing and he's getting really frustrated, she keeps that level head and she said, "You're still better than most." And like you said, he's asking her, "Do you have this? Do you have that?" and whatnot. And when he realizes how intergalactically worldly she is after having gone to Kashyyyk and learning these techniques from Gunji and the Wookiees, I mean, he's really taken aback by that and also very impressed by that. And I think it's at that point where he kind of realizes that, oh my gosh, Omega really, really does have a lot to offer, more so than I gave her credit for. And, to his credit, he starts opening up, because you could just tell at first, the whole meditation thing, he's looking at her like, "You are crazy. Why are we doing this?" But then he actually does try it. And that's such a tender moment. I just love that so much.
Yeah, because he doesn't want, and this is not unique to him. This is unique to a lot of people. It's one of the things I like about this show, is that they have this post-traumatic stress issue for Crosshair, but they, and it comes up, but it's not like, here it is again, here, beating you over the head with it. It's something that has to be addressed. Hunter tells Omega, see if you can get that hand looked like. It's only going to get looked at, because it's only going to get worse. And so I think Hunter knows Omega's the only one Crosshair is going to listen to about this issue, and they've developed that relationship. And so he gets it looked at, and when AZ can't find anything wrong with it physically, that it's something that may never be 100%, he storms off until Omega catches back up with him, and at the target practice, and that they're trying to do things there. So where do you think this goes, Colby? Do you it is, I'm coming up with all kinds of new ways of saying this, but Omega is Crosshair's life Sherpa, life coach when it comes down to it. And he, at the end of this episode, when they're doing the meditation, she kind of repositions him, and then he like looks over her like nervously, and to see him, kind of like, should I do this? Am I doing it right? Which is like the opposite of what we saw in the last episode when they were in the Marauder, and she was imitating his stance in the back seat.
Yeah.
And now the roles have reversed.
Oh, I love that. I had not thought of that, because she did. She even had the toothpick in her mouth, just, she's looking, and Hunter looks at her and sees her looking over at Crosshair. And now we've got the flip of that. Just within an episode, he's looking over at her saying, "Okay, am I doing this right?" It's the $1 million question, I think, guys, is like, where is this going? That where are we going? And I'm afraid of the answer, so I'm I'm not even going to try to approach it, just because we don't know what happens with these characters beyond early May, with this show. Um, but I wanted to bring up something since we're talking about that dynamic between Omega and Crosshair earlier. I think it was the scene before the meditation scene. They're sort of it's right when he's doing the target practice. They're sitting by that rock, and she's sort of sitting up on the rock, and he's sulked down on the floor back against the rock. And first of all, I'm very happy that they've made this about his mind and not just some easy cop out or put him on a Bacta tank or put him some magic Bacta on his hand and we're going to fix him. No, this is a more rich story that we're going to be treated to, because we're going to see him evolve through this and heal through this. So one of the things I think is key, though, is that Omega tells him after the target practice that he has to fix this. Like, this is his. He has to take ownership over this issue. Stop denying that it's nothing. Stop saying that there's nothing wrong, because that's what he's doing, right? He finds out that it's not something physical. He's like, nothing's wrong with my head. He's in denial. She empowers him through that, right? She says, no, this is yours to fix. But not only does she put it on him, then that next scene we see, she comes alongside him and makes sure he knows, you're not alone through this. I will be right here, literally in the scene, right next to you, and I'm going to help guide you through, and I'm going to do what I can, offer you what I have to help heal you and make you whole again. And again, it's just another amazing character moment between this character that, honestly, I with Crosshair, I found him very unlikable from the beginning. He was not one of my favorites. He was always the sandpaper for everybody else. But now this season, I'm just like, my gosh, can we have a series with just Omega and Crosshair? I would be okay
Oh,
with it,
yeah.
because they're so dynamic, the two of them together.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that, Colby, is that I keep saying, as much as I love The Mandalorian and Grogu, and as much as I loved Obi-Wan, with him and Leia, I didn't want any more of these adult-child pair-up Star Wars. But I'm
Yeah.
so sucked into this Crosshair
Yeah.
Omega relationship was essentially the same thing that we're
Absolutely.
getting. Yeah. Jay, when it comes to Crosshair, did you think at all, like, at the beginning here, Hunter dictates that he and Rucker are going to go find Fennec Shand. This is important that Omega lay low. And then when Hunter says, you and Crosshair will stay here, and Crosshair's like, that's fine with me. Was that because Crosshair didn't really go on that mission, or is it because he wanted to stay behind with Omega?
Oh, I think he wanted to stay behind, quite honestly.
Mhm.
And, I think that there was a lot to be said for, yes, he wants to also help out with trying to figure out what this whole M count thing is. But this is his way of protecting Omega. He knows that his brothers are capable of taking on this mission. And so he's going to stay behind, to do his part there. But I also think that, again, that he just appreciates Omega's ability to help him too, and as much as he was resistant to that at first, and he's still cantankerous about the whole thing, that he really craves that. And that there was a big part of him that was really glad that he was able to make that decision to stay behind.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay. Well, we've spent well over half this episode talking about this element here. So let's move on to the other mission. And we get this report from Fee. I just got to say, one last Crosshair and Omega thing. Crosshair's like, who's Fee? Because he hasn't met her yet.
Yes,
And Fee
that's
describes
right.
her
Yep.
as a liberator of ancient wonders. And Crosshair just
I
gives her
love
this
it.
look. Pirate. Okay, she's a pirate. But then Fee explains the whole bit with the bounty hunters retrieving high M count targets, and they want to know what's going on. And so hey, we know someone. It's Fennec Shand. Let's go find Fennec Shand. So Hunter and Wrecker get to the space station. I was trying to figure out if we'd seen this place before. It seemed familiar, but I didn't recognize it. Did either of you?
I did not.
I
No.
I didn't either, but it reminded me of one of where Cassian Andor goes early on in Rogue One
Oh
to
yeah.
talk to his his contact there. It's a different design, but it's sort of similar because it's a sort of like this machine, right? A station that's out there in orbit.
See, I was along the same lines, wondering if it was the Rings of Refrain, from Rogue One as well, but it was missing the asteroid chunks in order for it to be the same thing. But it did seem like it had that connectivity portion that was between the two of them, which was so okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought that. But it does have this really cool space cantina, and I don't know this for certain, but I felt like those bouncer droids were of a similar design to or make as L337 from Solo Star Wars Story. Did either one of you think that or notice any similarity?
Ooh, did not pick up on that. Colby, how about you?
I did not either. That is a good call. And now I'm going to have to go rewatch this episode because I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. So, but I love me some L3. So I am definitely going to go back and see what this is.
Yeah, they look like L3's big beefier brothers, but the same kind of saucer type shaped head. But anyways, that's not even the most important thing. There's a lot of shenanigans going on. There's the one character that's stealing a drink from another only to have it bashed over his head. And Fennec is meeting with Rodian, who is emphatically saying that you have to know this is a message from me. And then Hunter and Wrecker show up at the table and basically tell them that this meeting's over. And Fennec says, nope, sit down. I don't have any business with them. So everyone's playing the tough guy. And eventually the Rodian gets up and leaves, and they get down to business with Fennec Shand. So we've got an opportunity to see Fennec in a bunch of different places now. We introduced to her in the first season of The Mandalorian. She gets shot in the gut. We know that Boba Fett rescues her and gets repaired in the Book of Boba Fett. Spoilers for some series if you haven't watched them. And then, of course, we've seen her previously in The Bad Batch. Colby, I feel like Fennec went through a character arc in the Book of Boba Fett that kind of changed her perspective on the world. But we get a lot of insight into her in this episode. What do you make of her?
She's so menacing. She's just so menacing. And I can imagine that Hunter and Wrecker just want to strangle her no less than 18 times in this quick little mission that they have, because she just has an answer for everything. How many times did we see her say something and the boys had no response? They literally just sat in silence because they know she has all the power. They are at her mercy, right? And it just happens throughout the entire episode, and it starts at this table. Can I make one quick observation that's not Fennec related? The bartender at this cantina is a modified pit droid that's wearing a little hat. He's got a little hat with goggles, and I want somebody to make, like, how you go to Celebration, you see these droids, people are controlling these droids. Please, can someone please make this guy? Or I don't care. I'll take a Funko Pop. I'll take an action figure. He's amazing. I love this
guy.
One
in Oga's Cantina. That's what we need
to see. Oh, there you go.
That's it. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I just from the beginning, she's got all the power and she's not afraid to use it. And I just feel like that character that we see her become in the Book of Boba Fett, she's really far removed from that, because this is still way before all of this. And although we know she has compassion because of how she handled the Omega situation earlier in the show, she is, and she says it right off the bat, she's all about making sure she's in a better place at the end of the day than she started that day. And she's not afraid of exerting that power.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, her values are so much more compartmentalized at this point in her life, that she can see how she needs to take care of things in this situation and in this situation and in this situation. She's stone cold. You're right. She does have a little bit of empathy for Omega. And I think that maybe because there's a part of her that sees something in Omega that maybe she sees in herself or saw in herself at one time. But, then again, as you said, at the end of the day, she's just all about making sure that she's taking care of herself.
Yeah. I found her to be kind of like the moral kin to DJ from The Last Jedi. She even goes 100%. So far when Wrecker says, you'll just take money from anybody. And she's like, good guys, bad guys.
Yeah.
Their money all spends the same. Kind of like when DJ says, like, sometimes they blow you up, sometimes you blow them up.
Yeah.
And, his whole thing, don't join. And, hers is not that you don't join, you profit off of everybody just the same when it comes down to it. So I was glad to see her in this episode. And I like the fact that they've kept her morally ambiguous when it comes
Mhm.
down to it, so that they aren't spoiling that character arc for her when it comes to the Book of Boba Fett so much later in the timeline
Mhm.
here. And okay, so they're going after this praying mantis, Sylar
Yes.
Saris. And I was wondering when I watched this if this was an attempt to include the praying mantis character from the Mos Eisley Cantina that was largely cut out of A New Hope. And then I don't know how much you can take this to the bank, but at least I went to Wikipedia and looked up Sylar Saris, and they said he was a Yamri bounty hunter, which is also known as a hook. And this is the character that was cut out. And I love that they brought this back, because if you look at some of the production stills from A New Hope, it really is just this big green praying mantis they stuck in the corner. But they turned this guy into a threat, something to be feared. But what did you think about him?
He's so scary, and just because praying mantises are so scary anyway.
Mm.
And I used to think that they were just, I'm sorry to go off on this little tangent here, but praying mantis is forcing me. Um, what they do to hummingbirds is terrifying, and I don't know if you know about
No,
this, but I'm not
no.
going to. No, just don't. It's not nice. Don't have hummingbird feeders outside your window. Those little red ones, where hummingbirds come in, because praying mantises hang out on them and they attack hummingbirds. And that's God's honest truth. I've seen it on the
Oof.
interwebs, and the interwebs never lies.
Huh.
It is terrifying. So this is the mindset I bring into seeing this character, which is very formidable himself, because he's taken Wrecker and Hunter apart. Another very, very dark, and even in my dark room as I'm watching this pre-sunrise, very dark scene where you could barely see what's going on, and he just takes them apart. And it's one of my favorite things when Star Wars takes these obscure little ideas and turns them into something new, like you're talking about, Dennis,
Mm.
because no idea is ever wasted at Lucasfilm, right? Even if it doesn't make it into a final product, they're like, hold on, we're going to keep this up on the bookshelf. We're going to pull it off when we want to and use it and make it cool. And he's just a great example of that.
Oh, indeed, indeed. And Jay, I thought of you the moment I heard that he worked for the Haxian Brood Crime
Oh,
Syndicate,
yeah.
because you're such a big Jedi Fallen Order,
Mhm.
Jedi Survivor fan. That's like, okay, we need more about this story.
Heck yes, we do. I know, and it's so funny because I'm sure my husband gets so annoyed with me because I'm not quiet when it comes to my comments on things that I see or hear. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Haxion Brood, what?" So, yeah, so I'm very intrigued by this. But Colby, I'm with you. I mean, anything that has compound eyes kind of freaks me out anyways, and I think that that goes back to just watching Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, which was one of my very favorite horror movies. I call it a horror movie because it is horrifying. And so I think that that's just kind of stuck with me, but this is such a cool character, and I love the fact, Dennis, that, you brought that whole trivia thing up, and I just adore that they actually have given this type of respect to a character that was originally just sort of, thrown in there in the background back in 1977, and now is, having this nice resurgence of being a very formidable enemy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so they have to go to this planet that is yellow, which is not pretty for it's like, you don't want to go to yellow planet. And
Sulfury.
it's full of toxic gas. They can't breathe the atmosphere. But this is where uh Sylar, uh Sylar Saris. You got the okay, that's can be tricky to
Yeah.
say. But Sylar is hanging out and he knows the place like the back of his claw. They never miss a beat when it comes to these
No, I
things.
know, that's right.
We would all just say back of his hand, but she thought to say back of his claw. And so she goes down and basically browbeats another pit droid into giving her a uh, boat at a reasonable price. And then they start off looking for Sylar. And, back at the cantina, Phoenix makes mention that she had read their profiles and that Hunter is this great tracker. And the thing she brought up about Wrecker is that he is great with demolitions, and his response is the best. Okay, there's been some evidence of that over the course of the series, but they've always portrayed Wrecker as the muscle, as the guy that's carrying stuff around and beating things with his fist and is great in the melee fight. Um, we kind of talked about this earlier. I really like the way that they continue to evolve his character. He's not just the loud, muscle bound guy with not much going on between his ears. He's shown some emotional maturity over the course of this season, being able to counsel Hunter. You're like, hey, last time we did this, not everybody came back. And sometimes, I think he's the most prone to his emotions getting the best of him and the like. But he's come a long way from that character that we got to meet in season 7 of the Clone Wars and season 1 of the Bad Batch. He was just loud and obnoxious all the time.
He's my guy. He's been my favorite from the beginning. Wrecker is from the Clone Wars when we were introduced, and they did put a little bit more emphasis on him blowing stuff up in the introduction. So early on, that was sort of the running joke was, okay, Wrecker, you get to blow some stuff up, and he'd get all super excited about it. So there's more of a connection to the blowing up and the destruction kind of stuff. But he just ticks all my boxes. He always makes me laugh. I love the humor that he brings, but he also brings that heart, like you're talking about, what he's done with Hunter with Omega from the beginning. They just connected. And I think sort of in a way, Wrecker is also childish. So he was able to relate to Omega that way. But you're right. He's showing more depth. He's not a one-trick pony. And he's my guy. I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid of the ending of this show, guys. I'm so scared. But yeah, I do. And one of the things I chuckled at this episode was when they're on the boat and Fennec tells, "Hey, tracker, keep your eye on the current." And then she's like, "Hey, whatever your name is."
Yeah.
It's just great. No respect whatsoever for these two.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
good.
My favorite moment with Wrecker this entire episode is when he says over the comms to Fennec, he went underground, and she says underground, and he screams, "You heard me!" she
Yeah.
you can tell she has to flinch because it's so loud. It's not that funny, but it made me. I had to pause the episode because I was laughing so hard when that happened. When I watched this the first time, and then when I was rewatching and do the notes, I just stopped everything I was doing. I just to watch that again. It's just a small thing, but it makes these episodes so great. They just think to add that stuff. They didn't have to add that. It didn't contribute anything to the story. But just, you heard me right in her ear. And the thing is, it's like, it's not just him being loud. It's like him being done
Oh
with
yeah.
all of this. It's the I am tired of you treating me this way. I'm tired of you questioning everything I say. And I said he went underground. He went underground. I thought that was just a fantastic moment.
Oh no, I agree because he's always been kind of looked at with this sort of like childlike mentality. But it gets to a point where yes, he's very fun loving and he's very, very gentle. He's the gentle giant kind of thing. But when it comes right down to it, he gets to a point where it's just like he's had, like you said, he's had enough.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And then you wanted to bring up another moment about Sylar. Is like he was just so tough during this fight. They finally get to the hideout, and he's hiding up on the ceiling behind Hunter, which was really cool. Some great Predator alien type vibes going on there with the way he dropped down and then started finding Hunter. And then it ultimately took 6 stun blasts
Yeah.
to bring this guy down. And when any of them tried to go mano a mano with him, they lost. They all 3 had to gang up on him at the same time.
And I
I
wonder if
also
it's
keyed in on. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
no, I was just gonna say he's got that like probably like an exoskeleton too, which protects him from some of those stun blasts. But yes, as you were, soldier. Go ahead, Colby.
He's a praying mantis. He's terrifying. I'm telling you, they're
Right?
the most terrifying insect out there. I also keyed in on the multiple stun blast. You never see stun blasts one after another, after another, after another, and it took them a while. But your enthusiasm for the Wrecker line made me think of a similar response I had in an earlier episode, and it's when Crosshair and Echo meet each other a couple episodes ago, and Crosshair goes, Omega runs up and gets a big hug from Echo, right? And then Crosshair goes, "What? No hug from me?"
Yeah.
And Echo goes, "But that's not even I can't even get it out of my face because I'm laughing already." Echo goes, "It depends on how good your intel is." It's another thing, like you said, Dennis. It has nothing to do with the story. It's not moving it forward, but it's adding to the experience, and it gives you just this look into this group of people that we've come to know and love over the course of these 3 seasons. And it's another great highlight from Wrecker is this line that you heard me. It's great.
Well, the last thing I want to touch upon, unless you guys have any things you want to discuss, is the alligators, the Star Wars alligators that you were talking about, Colby. You know, they have to get off into the water to disarm these mines, because if they go the long way around, that's going to give Sylar the advantage, but he won't see them coming this way. It ultimately ended up being no advantage, a completely wasted effort when it came down to it. But alligators are scary. These things were doubly so. But you brought them up the first time, Colby. What did you think about that entire encounter?
The thing that I'll say that haven't already said about that was when one of them actually got its teeth on Hunter and dragged him off of that boat, and Wrecker's response was just this supremely um, confident reaction in his abilities, and one of his abilities is strength. He did not think twice. He did not hesitate. He's just in the water, jumps on top of this thing because it's got his brother, and he is not letting anything happen to that guy. And I just loved it as another shining Wrecker moment. He just jumps right in, to no thought whatsoever of his own personal safety, just in the water where he knows there's these other alligators, and he just takes care of business and gets Hunter. And I just loved it, ate it up.
It's like throwdown Friday night wrestling kind of thing with the the alligators. Yeah, anytime you get creatures that you can't see underneath the water, again, that's another one of those sort of things that just freaks me out. And these things in general were pretty crazy because you get that one shot of their mouth or teeth, and it's just rows upon rows of these just needle sharp teeth. And they're just, yeah, their gums are just full of them. So very, very, very creepy. Very
I love
And they
uneasy.
weren't using stuns on those either. They had the
No.
set to blaster.
Yeah. And Wrecker hit one of them with another one of them at one point. So that was a
Oh,
great moment.
yeah.
Okay, so I lied. There's one last thing I want to talk about, and this is the very end. And they're back at the space station. The job's done. They've captured Sylar, and Fennec says, "Hey, it was a pleasure doing business with you." Hunter's like, "Oh, hold on. You promised to set us up with somebody who would know about what's going on here." And she said, "I don't have that information on me. I promised that I would, look into it. So I'm going to go look into it, and I'll have that person contact you." She leaves, and then she contacts someone that just said, "Hey," and she says, "I just completed this mission with these clones, and they're wanting to know what's going on with the M count thing." And then we get the Charlie Brown wah, 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 response. We have no idea what's being said. He's completely
Right.
garbled. I think they learned their lesson from Rebels, where they can't just have the person disguise the voice, because everyone will decipher that. And
Yep.
then she basically says, "Well, I'm sure you can track them down easily enough. I'll send you what I have." So, you guys want to speculate who she was talking to?
Colby, I'll let you take
I
this.
Thanks, Jay.
I have ideas,
Well,
but you're our
the
guest, so you get to go first.
thank you. I do appreciate it. The low hanging fruit are characters that we've seen in the trailer, right?
Mhm.
Because we've seen Cad Bane, we've seen Asajj Ventress. We know that these characters are out there and are on their way, and either one of them could fit the bill by all means. Part of me wants it to be Ventress because the earlier she shows up in this series, the more we're going to get of her theoretically, and that's what I want. I want some Ventress. But it could be anybody. I don't know that it's Cad Bane just because they were competing before with on the Omega mission, right? So I don't know that they would be allied in any way. So if I had to put money on it, if it's one of those two, I'm going to go with Ventress, but that's probably my heart talking more. But I sort of like the idea of it's an unknown character that we haven't anticipated yet.
Mhm.
Boba Fett, it could be Boba's out there somewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, anybody.
Yes. Okay. I was speculating about this, and one of the things that occurred to me is, okay, it's Boba Fett, but I feel like it's been made pretty clear through The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett that they didn't know each other prior to Boba Fett rescuing Fennec Shand there.
That's a good point. I had not thought of that. Yeah, you're right.
But that doesn't make me want to see Boba Fett show up in this series at some point any less, because I feel like with what we've been told, that Boba Fett was an unaltered clone of Jango, and technically Omega is supposed to be, other than having an X chromosome where a Y should have gone. I'd just love to see those two interact.
Mhm.
But that's an aside. Jay, what's your speculation on who this might be?
I'm kind of leaning toward Cad Bane, actually, because I just think that Ventress, as much as, as you said, Colby too, I want to see her, and we will. I just feel like Cad Bane seems to be the better fit.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person that perhaps could be out there that we were talking about last week, Dennis, and you said, we haven't seen this person, is maybe Sid.
Oh, yeah. No. Remind me, because I'm drawing a blank here. Didn't Fennec and Cad Bane face off when there was competing bounties for Omega in the past season? Because it was, I
They
think
did.
Nala Se had hired Fennec, and Lama Su had hired Cad Bane.
Yeah.
Is
They
that?
had a fight. They had a really memorable one. I can see it in my
Hmm.
in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
on a previous Camino lab, because there were scenes of I believe it was Omega walking around with like almost like Snoke like um, containers with
Mm-hmm.
like things in them, and yeah, it was up in the clouds, and yeah, they had a really good fight there. I believe it
They
was that
did.
episode. Yeah.
Hmm.
So this is,
Hmm.
as we're talking this out, this is making me start to think that it's more and more likely not Cad Bane, because he'd already know who they are. And Fennec would have just said these particular clones that you've dealt with before,
Hmm.
as opposed to, I've dealt with some clones. I just went on a mission with some clones. You should be able to track them down easily enough. I mean, it still could be Cad Bane, but if it's someone that we've seen in a trailer, like you pointed out, Colby, I'm thinking more and more likely it's Asajj Ventress.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a substantial observation actually, Dennis. And the thing with Cad Bane that made me think of him is because we know that he had been kind of working for Sidious in terms of, trying to find different types of targets. But, now that we're thinking about it even more and, my brain is kind of trying to connect all these dots, there's been a lot of speculation that perhaps Ventress and even Voss were, because we know Quinlan Voss was involved with creating the original path.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that maybe this is the opening to that, is that, perhaps Ventress is looking for these M count subjects so that she can help to save them in some way, shape, or form. And Omega fits that bill.
And she was also a bounty hunter for a while.
Right.
So
Yes.
maybe she's not. It's hard to say.
Right.
I'm really
Yeah.
curious about this story, the Size of Interest, because there'll be a lot to tell us. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we've gone way longer than we usually do for a Bad Batch discussion here. But before we wrap it up, does either one of you have any other observations?
I actually think that she's talking to Jar Jar Binks.
Okay. Okay.
Ooh,
Yeah.
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 Mic
No
drop.
one saw
I'll be
that
there.
coming. No one saw that coming.
No, Misa did not.
Alrighty then. Well, we'll put a pin in this episode right there. So, Colby, thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of Podcast Artists on our discussion of the Bad Batch. Before you go, why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about the podcast and just remind everybody where they can find it?
Well, I always appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you guys. It's always a pleasure. It's always something I look forward to. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, the ColbyCast, my sons and I, Caleb and Luke, they're in their 20s. We have watched Star Wars and Marvel and movies and television shows and enjoyed music together their entire lives. And we decided we would sit down and share it with everybody else. So that's what we do. We talk about Star Wars and Marvel and all those things and sometimes hockey. Hockey makes its way into our conversations from time to time as well. We all coach youth hockey, and we all just finished our season coaching 9 and 10-year-olds. Caleb is a goaltender, and he coaches goaltenders of all ages. So yeah, it's just a wonderful time. We get to sit down once a week and we record talking about things that we'll talk about the Bad Batch, we'll talk about a movie we saw, and we just try to have fun and keep it light and positive, and we love sharing it with everybody out there. So yeah, you can find us out there on all the podcatchers as well as the social media platforms that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. It's fun hearing the generational differences sometimes that you have with your boys on some of those shows.
They keep me on my toes. I never know what's going to come out of their face.
Oh my
Indeed.
gosh, I love that though. That is so cool that you all do that together.
All right.
Thank you.
Well then, with that, I want to say thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Artists and our discussion of the Bad Batch with Colby Meade. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe to Podcast Artists on your podcast of choice. Also, like to remind you that you can find all episodes of the show over on RetroZap.com, which is home to several other great podcasts covering everything from the MCU and DC to retro topics and Star Trek. As always, we greatly appreciate your 5-star ratings reviews on whatever podcatcher it is that you use, especially if that's Apple Podcasts. And please don't forget to share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. So speaking of which, Jay, you want to remind everybody what those social media contacts are one more time?
Sure, it's super easy to find us, unlike M Count targets. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust, and we have tons of other places that you can find us and connect with us as well. We are on Pinterest. We have 2 different YouTube channels. So we are on the classic YouTube as well as YouTube Music. We also have a Discord room where you can chat with us in real time, as well as all of the other RetroZap shows. So if you want to get in on that, the link for that is in our show notes. And another thing that's in our show notes is our TeePublic store link. So you can get one of 7 different show logo designs, or all 7, on all kinds of things from t-shirts, sweatshirts, and home goods and everything in between. And then we are also right now collaborating with Saber Masters. And so with Saber Masters, you can get the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, 2-for-1 deal right now going on for $199. And these are amazing lightsabers. We both endorse these very, very highly. So check out the link in our show notes, or you can go to sabermasters.com. And if you do want to pick one up, make sure that you enter the code STARDUST at checkout, and you can get an extra $10 off of your purchase. So win-win. So with that, Dennis, I know you've got some fun stuff coming up with Warp Trails and with your wife, Beth, in your podcast extraordinaire. So why don't you tell us all about that and anything else you have going on?
Dennis Keithley, podcast extraordinaire. Gonna get
There
that
you
on a
go.
business card. Okay, so my wife Beth and I are talking about Star Trek on Warp Trails, but that is only when it's in season, and that just happens to be in about a week and a half when season 5 Discovery hits Paramount Plus. So you can find that on the RetroZap podcast feed, or head over to RetroZap and look for the Warp Trails page for all of our current episodes and our past episodes covering previous seasons of Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, and Strange New Worlds. Jay, we've been calling it Cosplay Mageddon, and I know there's a lot coming up. So why don't you remind everybody what's going on there?
Oh, goodness. Well, in short order, I have a huge April coming up with a ton of different appearances and places where you can find me. So the best place to check all of that out is on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And I am currently very, very busy trying to finish my original concept Mandalorian build, and I am having a ton of fun with that. So check out all the work in progress Wednesdays. And once again, all of my feed and story experts or exposés, I guess you could say, of the places that I will be in April.
All right, upcoming on the show this Monday will be Star Wars news. We'll be talking a lot about the Acolyte there. And then on Wednesday, we're getting back into Star Wars comics with a discussion of issues 1 through 4 of the High Republic Phase 3 from Marvel. So that'll do it for episode 706 of Podcast Stardust. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend, and until next time, may the Force be with you.